Hello, slot race fans. I thought it might be interesting for at least a few people out there if I talked a little bit about my Friday regimen before I went racing on Saturday. It is now Sunday after the races, but we're talking about the races that happened on June 7th. So if you saw my previous video, I sort of tried to update you on the previous races up until this weekend. So Friday came along, and I still hadn't screwed with my cars much. I had started working on them, I guess, a couple of months ago, but it'd been a couple of months since the last time I was able to race out there. So I'd completely forgotten where I sat with the whole working on the car program, and I had to kind of dig through everything and figure out where I was at with it. And I had, over the months I'd been racing there, I'd been slowly improving the cars little by little. And I'll show you a couple of things that happen here. The J&K Products ready-to-run cars, like these here, like this chassis, I don't know if you can see up in there, but there's a spot where the front axle would have gone. And they come with a front axle and front tires. Well, you would have seen that on my earlier videos of this car when it had the front axle and front tires. And so, each week or so I would say, okay, I'd cut off the front axle and get rid of all that stuff, brings the weight down a little bit and lets the front end sit a little lower, things like that. And those are, I guess, the main improvements I'd been making. But I was still running my standard old LMP body and running this body here that somebody had given me in the track, which was really nice. So I had my LMP and my NASCARs going. And this coming week was supposed to be, or should I say Saturday, which was yesterday, was going to be LMP and NASCAR day. So, as I explained in the previous video, now of course my NASCAR is running it the correct body now, although it's a little bit, the body's pretty wore out. At least it's running the correct body to run with the rest of these guys, with the correct downforce and everything. My LMP body, on the other hand, was not. I'm still running the original ready-to-run body on it. And I'll show you the difference here. This is the original ready-to-run body, and this is the style of body that everybody's running now, the current body. And I showed a little bit of this in the previous video, but you can see right there, first off, the body on the left, the like I said, the ready-to-run body is much shorter. It's a little bit taller in the middle. You can't really tell that in this picture, but you can definitely see how the wing is way bigger on the new body, the new style body. And it's also a wider and longer body too. I've got both of these pushed up so their backs are against the track. So you can see the one on the right, the current body, is going to have a lot more downforce, and that's what everybody's running in that class. So they've been telling me all this time, you got to can that body, get a different body, get the right kind of body, or you're never going to do any good. And since I wasn't doing any good, I had to kind of listen to what they were saying, right? So I mentioned earlier about how I've been having a lot of trouble painting these bodies because they're so paper thin. Well, I had this one I had painted up, and I brought it out. But here's the problem. When I got to the track, it was so difficult to mount this body because it's just paper thin, tissue paper thin. And so when I got to the track and tried to mount it up, I just could not get it to work. It was so... You'll see how I cut off all this front end. It was just dragging the track everywhere, and I had to keep cutting more and more off of it. And it was, it had already gotten to the point that it was going to be way illegal anyway. And so one of the guys there at the track offered to sell me a couple of bodies. He sold me this one and this one right here so I could keep it going. So I ended up putting that body onto this chassis at the track. But let's get back to my Friday situation. So on Friday night, I'm thinking, okay, I've got my new painted up body, and that was before I had butchered it. And I've got my chassis ready to go, and I clipped off, I had a, well, yeah, Exactly. I had this one right here. This was actually my third J&K chassis, and I hadn't used it in any races yet because it had the wrong kind of motor. It basically had the previous generation motor, had the previous generation of body, and so I just used it for playing around on the track. I hadn't actually used it for racing yet. But since the last time I was at the track, I had bought the correct motor. Now this is actually the good motor. This is the one that everybody's running. I'm running stock motors and everything, or what you'd call the ready-to-run motor, the motor that comes in the ready-to-run cars. Everybody's upgraded to this motor, which is a little bit faster, and they're at a good price. They're $12, so they're considerably quicker for the investment in this motor. So now over the past few months I've gone and I've, like I said, gotten rid of the front axles, front wheels, put stickers on it instead. You can see here, they don't even use front wheels, I just use stickers. So, Friday night comes up and I'm going to start upgrading my system before I get to the track. It's an excellent time to do it on Friday night right before the races, right? So I took this car, which, like I said, had all the old-fashioned stuff on it. It had this old body, NASCAR body that I was never going to be able to use. And it had a previous generation of motors, not even the standard stock motor that I had from this car, but it had the previous generation that has replaceable brushes and stuff, which is really, for all practical purposes, it's a nicer motor, probably longer lasting. You can replace parts on it and everything, but it's considerably bigger and heavier, and so it doesn't handle the same way, and it has maybe equivalent or maybe a little bit less power, but the problem is the weight of it is so much more. I wish I had one of those handy to show you, but I don't at the time. But if you guys look at any like vintage slot car stuff, you'll see it was the standard, I think, called a D something or another motor, and it looks more like an RC car brushed motor. It has replaceable brushes and an end bell and stuff that looks like it could at least be removed or pried off or something, so you can change the windings or change the armature inside. Well, these style motors, of course, these ones that everybody's using now, they are basically completely closed up. You don't do anything to this. You put it in the car, you stick a pinion on it, and you run it. You don't mess with the brushes. You can't even mess with the brush tension because you can't even get to the brush springs. So it's a little bit different ball game. But anyway, so I've got my new motor. I've got my new body. And so I said, rather than messing with my running cars here, I'll just take this one that has all the wrong parts on it and upgrade it to the right parts and use it for LMP now. Excellent plan, right? Well, I got to work on it. I even had one of the upgraded guide blades here, and fresh brushes and everything, fresh braids. And so I put all this together and cut this stuff out here to where I could solder these on. I made this bulletproof so that by making these holes bigger and soldering on here, instead of trying to fold the stuff over and solder to the top, I made it so these brushes cannot come out. And I've seen in a number of these races when I was videoing that people's brushes or braids, whatever you want to call them, popped out of the car during the race. And I said, well, I'm not going to have that happen to me. So I soldered all this up and I run the cables through the little holder here. Well, that wasn't what I wanted to do. Sorry, I disassembled this chassis and then reassembled it to try to show what I was wanting to show here. Just kind of snapped it back together. But anyway, wired up, put in the new motor, new pinion, got it all ready to go. And then I realized this is an older generation of this J&K chassis, and it has a bigger rear axle. And so I didn't have the right gears for it anymore. I'd already soldered up this pinion here, and it turned out that I could not find a spur that would work with this axle in my mess, because everything I had was set up to run on the smaller axles. Oh boy. So that was kind of a bummer. When that didn't work out, I transferred all this stuff over to this chassis. And the reason it didn't work out is because These JK chassis, as I was talking about earlier, they have a front axle and front wheels. Well, everybody has canned the axles and wheels, and they're just using these stickers instead. You just use these stickers instead of front wheels. When I was trying to mount this body onto the chassis like this, I was having troubles getting the body down low enough because of these humps that are sticking up. Well, the actual racing J&K style chassis like these, which I ended up buying, of course, they don't even have that up there for the front axle, so it lets the front end get down lower. Well, I didn't know that at the time. I just knew that these were sticking up too high for this body to sit on it. So I grabbed my handy dikes and I went to town. I grabbed that thing and I twisted and pulled and yanked and cut through it, and then grabbed the other side and twisted and pulled and yanked and cut through it, and then went, oh crap, I didn't cut off the spots where the axle were supposed to go. I had the whole chassis turned around backwards, and I cut off the little hump over here that mounts the body. So basically I ruined this piece here. This piece of chassis was no good. I just took it all out and threw it away. Right, that's useless. So basically I had to take all this and can it. By this time it was getting late at night, and so I had to can all this and just kind of punt. I decided, okay, well, we're just going to mount this body onto my chassis here, which was the one that had this body on it, which was the wrong kind of body. Well, I proceed to go ahead and mount it up to here, and it didn't mount up very well at all. I was hating life. I did cut off the right things this time so that it could sit down like it needed to. Didn't cut off the wrong tabs. So all of that seemed good, except somehow the body mounting just was not good at all. And when I got to the track, let me show you the difference. When I got to the track, the car wouldn't run right because it was just dragging all around. I kept having to hack off more and more from the front end of the car. So you can see there how much shorter it is. I took off that whole front splitter and it was still dragging. So one of the guys there offered to sell me a couple of bodies. I got this body here and this one. So I mounted this body up to my car and I was able to run the LMP races. Well, that's basically what I ended up with. I ruined one chassis. I can still use this part of it, except that I'm going to have to take no, I really can't, because this uses the bigger, heavier duty axle, so I don't want that. I need to take the motor and the guide and everything back off of this and put it onto a new chassis. Maybe that's for this coming week. So I think that pretty much wraps up most of my screw-ups. I think there was some more stuff that happened. Like I said, it seemed like everything that night that I touched just went to crap, and I couldn't hardly get anywhere with any of it. But in the end, I managed to show up to the races with, like I said, this car with this chassis on it, and this car right here. So I was able to race, and it ended up being a lot of fun. I'll tell you about the races in the next video. Thanks for watching.